Hello and welcome to Bird Barrier. My name is Michael Gallion, and today we are going to be talking about the revolutionary product Optical Gel. Optical Gel is a multi-sensory deterrent disc, and it's used to solve high pressure nesting. It's used to solve medium pressure. There are all kinds of situations that this can solve, and is a very useful tool in the world of bird control. By far, the easiest way to stop birds is using this product, especially if you're new to the world of bird control. In Canada, the product is slightly different, equally effective, and known by the name Optica. Optical Gel in action is a video that we're going to show you now so that you can see exactly what it looks like when a bird reacts to seeing this product that's been placed in their high pressure locations for the first time. And you can see the first sensory that's involved, which is the visual trigger of Optical Gel. Let's watch the video. It is one of a kind. Although there are competitors that are creating their own versions of what this product appears to be doing, there is only one solution that can be used for high pressure. So you have to be very careful. All the training that you're going to receive on multisensory technology is about Bird Barrier Optical Gel. And any other product that you will see that is available that might look similar is not to be used for high pressure nesting. Now, one thing that you have to realize in the world of bird control, if you're a professional and you're asked to solve a bird control problem, you are going to be dealing with mostly high pressure. You're going to be dealing with nesting, you're going to be dealing with real heavy bird activity that's so part of a structure that you're going to need to use a nice high pressure deterrent like this to solve the problem. What exactly is Optical Gel? Well, as I mentioned, it's a multi-sensory deterrent. It affects more than just visual, but mainly it's a visual sensory repellent, as we saw in the video. Now, in the world of bird control, if a visual trigger is all that was needed, then there would be no need for something like this product. However, if you worked in bird control for any length of time, you will realize that plastic owls and reflective devices that can maybe reduce some activity are soon overtaken by the reclaiming activity of the bird. So it's not enough to just have the visual trigger. The visual trigger that we're talking about is all about UV light. Birds can see ultraviolet light. Humans cannot see it. birds are incredibly sensitive, and this product is designed to cast off and reflect as much UV light as possible in all situations. Therefore, it's so well designed that it takes very little light to reflect the UV light. So no, this does not have to be used in direct sunlight. That's a very common question. Not only does it have to does not require direct sunlight, even in the evening, there's enough UV light being reflected from urban lighting situations that there's plenty of light. So you don't have to worry about the light factor wherever birds are landing and placing their feet. This is where you'll use the product. Now, when the birds have gotten past the visual and they've decided they must go in and still reclaim their nest, they will go in and encounter the product more directly. And this is where the smell sensory, which is the second part of the multisensory, comes into play. Birds reclaim using pheromones. They smell the pheromones in the droppings. They're going to use those as a guide. If we clean the area properly using Dissolve It. Dissolve It is a special cleaning solution made by Bird Barrier and specifically designed with an active enzyme that is targeting that pheromone and the way that droppings are used by the bird. By getting rid of that smell, we're going to have a huge impact on the birds. Not only by erasing the smell, the cleanup and the sanitation erase and mask that smell as well. So the birds themselves have a sensitivity to smell. This product is designed to cause the kind of repelling action that comes from that activity, that biology of the birds. Now in Optical Gel, peppermint and citronella have been added to the product as a booster because these smell components are known to naturally repel birds. In the Canadian version, they required us to remove those oils. And the only exception that has to be made with the Canadian version is that we require you to use Dissolve It. This way, we're sure that the smell component is going to be fully active in terms of solving the bird problem. Once the birds have gone through the visual and possibly challenged the smell component, they can still be even persistent in trying to figure out a way to reclaim their nesting site. And that's when the final part of the sensory comes into play, and that's the touch factor. Optical Gel is designed primarily using beeswax as a substrate along with agar. Both of these are food grade products, very sticky. And when the birds step into this, if they do, or they get any of this substance on their feathers, it's not going to harm the bird in any way. However, the birds will fight to get rid of that off of their feathers. And now the whole cycle is complete for even the most persistent birds, especially birds that were in the process of having offspring. If they had chicks or eggs in that site, they go through this process one sensory effect at a time. The harder they try to reclaim, the more repelling action they're going to experience, and ultimately leads to what we are trying to achieve in all of our bird control. And that is to get the bird to abandon the nesting site and relocate and start nesting somewhere else. Those are the scientific factors of the product itself. Multisensory using sight, smell, and touch is a great combination multisensory effect to get the birds to relocate. Let's talk about actually using the product. Now that we know the science of how the product works, we have to use it effectively so that the bird still cannot figure out a way to reclaim. Now, birds do still reclaim if optical gel is not used properly, but that holds true to any deterrent when it's not used properly. So let's talk about the spacing first. Spacing is critical. You have to use 6-inch spacing, center to center, for the high pressure areas. So let's take a look here in the studio of how to do this spacing properly. Now, again, we know that the pigeon is not a protected species. We don't want to harm this bird, but sometimes we do have to remove the chicks and eggs. You got to remove that, and as well as all of the residue that you're going to encounter in this area. And you're going to have to clean this properly. Now we're going to be talking about cleanup coming up after the spacing so that you can understand how to do the proper pre-treatment to lead to this. But let's assume we've done the proper pre-treatment and this area is fully clean. Now 6-inch spacing center to center is critical. To figure out the 6-inch spacing, the easiest method is to place 3 of the discs together and then remove the center one, and now we see that's the proper spacing. And of course, after we get this spacing correct and we've glued these down, what we're going to do then is remove the lids. To fully activate the product and to make it work properly, you have to remove the lids, and now UV light is going to reflect properly off of this entire situation. Now for during the presentation here, I'm going to keep these covered so that I don't touch the actual optical gel by mistake. It's important to remove the lids when you're using it. Now if we did just 2 discs, placed 6 inches center to center apart, it's certainly effective at keeping the bird from entering this area. But it's not going to keep the reclaiming bird from coming into this area still and investigating and figuring out a way to reclaim. And if we'd only put a couple discs in an area, these birds are going to figure out a way to bury these discs and try to get back to its entire nesting situation again. That's why it's important to not only use 6-inch spacing, but we have to cover the entire area properly. So to do that, you have to cover it using the 6-inch spacing, and of course we can stagger the disc as we're seeing how we're using them right now. Use a staggered pattern, and this is it right here. We can cover this entire area, and now the bird is going to not have the ability to enter into this area and build a nest. There's one more factor that comes into play with the product itself, okay? We just showed you how to do the high pressure nesting area, 6-inch, critical 6-inch, and that's center to center. Notice the measurement there. It's not 6-inch between the disc. It's 6-inch from center of one disc to the center of the next. Now what about other areas where they're not nesting? Well, we can space them a little bit further apart. That's to save cost. We're not overusing the product on areas, but we want to make sure we don't really allow the bird a way back into its nesting area. So we talked earlier about the nesting area. There's also what we call staging areas. These staging areas are the areas that surround a nesting area, just like here. You see on this table, if that were a nesting area, we have areas surrounding the nesting area that need to be treated as well. We cannot just treat only high pressure nesting areas and expect the bird still not to land and come in the area. So in this case, it's very common for this reclaiming resident bird to come in and have access next to its nesting area from all angles. Now there's no surface here on either side, but over here there is. So we see that we've placed also some disc here into the staging area, as well as up here. Now let's talk about the staging area spacing. You saw on the slide that I just showed you that it was a 10-inch center to center. And to figure out the measurement on that, it's very similar to using the same idea that we used earlier. What we're going to do instead is use 2 discs. And once we remove out the 2 middle discs, that gives you the spacing needed for a staging area. So we can, surrounding the disc here, let's look at the overhead view here, and you see the same idea. We can use discs that are spaced out further apart than the nesting area, and this prevents the bird from comfortably entering back in to its nesting area, not being able to be comfortable. Now there is a chance and in likelihood when you do your first installs, you are going to see for a short period the bird will come into the disc area. Sometimes they'll try to land between the discs. This is common, but the bird is very uncomfortable in this situation, and it's giving its last ditch effort to figure out a way to reclaim, and at that point the bird will fly away and you will not see that bird come back. If we've done a pre-treatment properly and we've done all the spacing properly, the birds are going to relocate. And in the 5 years of doing this product, I have no documented cases where proper spacing, proper pre-treatment have been used and we've had a failure. So this product is very reliable if you follow the instructions as we've shown you here. Here's an example of what happens when you do leave too much space. This ledge was the problem, the outer ledge, not the whole ledge, just the outer ledge. And where we see the arrows there, we see there's too much space between the discs, and therefore the birds came back and they were still gaining enough confidence to get in between these discs. And the reason why is these birds were flying into the facility. We see below there's an open door, and there is still high pressure involved. This was a staging area they were used to get the high pressure inside the building. If we don't space these properly, the birds are going to have enough comfort to go in between. Now, what we did here to solve the problem is just clean off the droppings, come back the next week, and when we realized that there was too much space, where we see the yellow circle there, we just place a disc in between the existing ones, and then soon the problem was solved in terms of that ledge. No more droppings were falling down after it was done properly. If we look at this slide, this is an example of what a site should look like, especially if you rented a lift like we see in the corner here, the lower left corner. There's the blue bar is a part of the lift frame, and the articulating boom lift had to go up high. You don't want to have to go back and redo things like that. So proper solid 6-inch center to center on all the nesting areas, and from below you won't even see any of this. This is a great way to solve the problem. This is the way it should look. The key strategy is this: use the product where the birds place their feet. Wherever the birds are placing their feet, whatever that structure is, you're getting dropping activity that's falling down from that area. So we want to place it where the birds are placing their feet on the staging and nesting areas. Place where they touch, not what they're looking at, okay? That's the easiest way for me to describe where the product goes. So we do get this question: should you ever place them on a wall facing out? And the answer is yes, for the same reason. Woodpeckers, for example, place their feet on the wall. Therefore, we're putting the product where the birds place their feet by placing it on the wall. We see above and below the hole, because the birds will move around to avoid these discs. We place maybe sometimes 2 or 3 of them around each hole after we treat it properly. Another example is with mud swallows, cliff swallows or barn swallows. They use mud to build their nest, and these birds will actually put their feet on the walls, they'll put their feet on the ceiling. Therefore, that's where you want to place the disc. Let's talk about pre-treatment. This is the most critical part of the whole process. We actually have a video coming up that's going to show exactly how to do the pre-treatment. But when we open any box of optical gel or Optica, or even the contractor boxes, you're going to see this stop sign. This stop sign says treatment area must be thoroughly cleaned and sanitized before this product is installed. And that's what we're going to teach you now, how to do the proper install. This slide that is coming up, I want you to be ready to do a screen capture, because that's going to be your step-by-step instruction that you should take with you. But remember, dissolve it must be used. Don't use other cleaning solutions. A lot of people think that sanitizers are all that needed to do bird cleanup. Well, that's the last step of cleanup, is sanitizing. But your first job is to get all the bird droppings and all the pheromones completely eradicated from that site. Dissolve it is your best product to use. It's designed specifically to go hand in hand with this product. We spray dissolve it and let it soak for 20 minutes. We don't start scrubbing right away. We let this product really soak in. Once it soaks in for about 20 minutes, then we're going to scrub and remove all the contamination from that area. We're trying to get this site to look the way it was before birds ever entered the picture. We rinse all of that residue with a lot of water and then wipe things down. Now, we're not done at that point. It looks good, But what we want to do is go in and mist on some diluted bleach water over that surface and then let that dry without rinsing that bleach off. We want to leave it there, and now the site is ready for the install. The improper surface prep is the most common mistake, so don't make that mistake. As a certified installer, you need to follow these steps. You're going to want to follow these steps. There's no reason not to do the proper pre-treatment. Then, especially in the early days when this product first came about, we just realized we have to really emphasize this point. So the pre-treatment is really critical. Now, let's watch a video. Now, in this video, I want to point out that we're going to center this install around what we call our cleaning kit or our starter kit. You may qualify for a free starter kit if you have a job and a project coming up and you're saying, wow, I think this product could be the right solution. Send an email directly to me. There's my email you see on the screen. If you send me an email with the checklist, remember what we talked about in Introduction to Bird Control. I want to see up close photos of the droppings. I want to see the nest. I need to know what kind of birds are involved. I need the details about the project. Send me photos that you've taken. And if you qualify, you can get a free starter kit that you'll see that was used in this video coming up. Now here's an actual install so you can see how to do a proper install. This video is available to everyone to use in their own marketing. You can use this video to show customers. It's a great thing to help explain to customers what you're going to do. The kit includes the instructions step by step, as well as 24 of the disc. You get the Dissolve It, which gets water added to it for a proper solution. You have the adhesive, mask and gloves, and the spray bottle that's going to be used for the cleanup. Great place to start is with a site where bird spikes had birds nesting in it. This is a great place to place optical gel. Again, there's the stop sign reminding you to clean it properly. What we do first before we hit it with the Dissolve is we want to get anything loose out of the way. Loose droppings, old contaminated materials, that all has to be removed, and get as much of the loose material up. Now these dry droppings are most hazardous to your health, so make sure you're wearing proper breathing protection. The Dissolve It is a diluted ratio 1:1 in this case. We have stronger concentrations that are going to be available, but we add water, and now we're going to soak everything down with Dissolve It. We're going to cover it thoroughly, all the way down to the ground. The droppings that fall to the ground are important as well. The birds will use that scent. So we cover everything, let it soak for 20 minutes. Now we're going to come in, use a little bit of elbow grease. You want to use plastic scrubbers if it's on an area that might be damaged from scrubbing. Oftentimes wire brushes can be used on unimportant areas, but what we're doing is we're getting it back to its original state. If the mesh needs to be used in certain areas, of course you want to screen out certain sections, like in this case. Now here is the bleach pod. What we've done is we add bleach to the water bottle that was empty, and actually except for the water, shake it up, and now we've got our proper bleach mixture. Now our goal isn't to completely use this bottle. Our goal now is to simply give a nice light coating, and this is sanitation for your health. This is going to get rid of any remaining dangers for you so that you can remove your gloves at this point, remove your mask. You've cleaned up the area properly. Now you can use your hands more effectively in terms of using the product. We're going to start where the nesting was, 6-inch center to center. This entire area was under overhead protection. Now if we don't follow it properly, this is what will happen. These are examples where only a couple discs or maybe the lids were left on, no cleanup. Birds will cover that up, so we have to be very thorough. We notice that this sign is under an eave that provided all overhead protection, so the entire area was a nesting site. If we look at it from below, you can't even see the disc. This is a beautiful result, and that was the last time we ever saw a bird at this site. By getting rid of the spikes and the nesting area properly, birds have stayed away for over 2 years at this site, which is near our headquarters here in Southern California. So there you see how to properly install the product. The starter kits are available. You can use those as a great tool in selling the product, to demonstrate how to use the product, to demonstrate the efficacy on smaller areas. And that is a really important part of the whole process. Let's get a little bit more into some of the details of install that we didn't talk about, like gluing. Now, white lightning comes in the starter kit, and the reason we recommend white lightning is it doesn't cause any permanent damage to the surface, and eventually the white lightning residue can be cleaned off fairly easily. But sometimes we want to use a more permanent glue. So Barrier Bond, which is our standard adhesive for all of our deterrents, is a very strong, weatherproof. It lasts for very many years. It's going to hold the disc into place for many years. Only on areas where staining isn't important can you use that. Okay, and remember to remove the lids once you have glued them down. We mentioned that already a couple times. And that's where the stick comes involved. Now, if you saw me earlier here where up close here, we'll take a look, and you see there's a lip here where the lid is attached, and you have to sort of hold that lip down to keep the disc in place and then remove the lid. Well, this was way too cumbersome to have an effective install. So a lot of the early starters of the product asked for a tool like this. So we innovated and we came up with this tool called the stick, which easily sits right over and allows you to press and keep the disc in place to remove the lid. That's one use of the stick tool. Another use of the tool itself is to preload, and then you apply the glue to the bottom, and then you just press it into place, remove the lid, and then you're set. You continue this process, you go down the line. Sometimes we see two-man crews that will use the stick tool. One person is loading, the other one is gluing them down one at a time, and you speed up the whole process. But believe me, this tool is really important. Not only is it good as a tool for install, but it's a guide for the spacing that we talked about earlier, and there's also instruction on the back side of the stick tool, so just to make sure that you remember the details about proper use of the product. There's also magnetic versions of Optical Gel. This is a great tool as well, and these come in very handy. The most common place where I see magnetic Optical Gel used is on steel I-beams and also on ductwork, like in parking garages. So we have a steel I-beam right here, and I've got the magnetic Optical Gel here. You see there's a simple magnet that's placed on the back side of the disc. These cost a little bit more, but the extra cost for the disc is basically neutralized by the no need for adhesive and how quickly you can install these. They go down a lot faster, and of course after you get them down, they're very easy to move around and get them in a perfect position. And then after we get them in position, we're going to go through and we're going to remove the lids as we showed earlier. So magnetic Optical Gel not only is important for Optical Gel, but we sell a lot more in Canada with Optica, because there are situations where the adhesive has to be at least 40 degrees Fahrenheit in order for you to glue these down, and the magnetic can go down in any temperature situation. Another example that we have of how to install the disc is with the zip mount. Now I'm going to show you a sample of a zip mount right now, and you see it there in the photo, but the zip mount opened up some other possibilities for using this product. Now I've got a zip right here. I'm going to show you one up close here with the camera. You see the teeth on the underside here that grip very well. There's a groove down the middle, but as you can see here, those teeth sit very well and grab a hold of the surface very easily. All right, now I'm going to show you also that there is the gap, or this little piece underneath on the bottom side. This is where the zip tie itself goes. So here I have a zip tie. I'm going to thread this through, And it's nice is that this holds very well. This really matters when you're up on a ladder and you're actually installing this. Let's see here. So once you get this threaded through, what you do is you loop it around and you start your zip tie. You don't snug it up all the way, you just kind of get it loose fitted. Then once you get it in position here, we can pull this very tight, and then all you're going to do is just trim off the excess of the zip tie and you're good to go. Then the disc itself just snaps right in, and then you can remove the lid and you're good to go. Now, one of the things about the zip tie that introduced the concept to the whole world of optical gel was this idea of coming back. You know, you're going to mount these zip ties in, you should have the ability to eventually replace out the disc, and we can do that by simply going up, remove the old disc and place a new one in eventually when it needs to be replaced. Now, one thing I want to mention at this point is that optical gel is a long-term solution. Your idea of replacing the disc on a regular basis that's not part of the technology or the strategy. This product lasts for at least 2 to 4 years, which is far longer than needed to get rid of resident birds. And we'll talk a little more about that coming up. But one thing that came up more and more in different industries was that they need to maintain areas, they need to get back into areas, and what they want to have the ability to easily remove the disc when needed and then replace the disc. So that's the final tool that we're going to show you here, which is called the click mount. The click mount is similar to the zip tie. It's you know, the product itself here, I'm sorry about that, is designed similar. It can be zip tied using these grooves here, but the idea here is that this gets glued flat onto a surface, and we see this little tab here. It allows you to simply slide the disc in and then remove the lid. So there you go, right? This was glued first, and now we can put the disc in. Eventually, if maintenance is needed, you want to replace these out, we just simply hold down the tab, the disc will slide out, and we put a new disc in, and it's very simple to use. We're seeing more and more of a recurring revenue model where there is replacement of disc. That comes from the customer side of the world. Also, the zip tie mount will work very well for angle iron and all different surfaces. You have the ability to put this on just about any surface. Let's talk about how long it lasts, because we touched on that, and that's going to be one of the most common questions. How long does the product last? Well, it lasts at least 2 years, far longer than needed to solve resident birds. This oxidation that we see over time, that's a normal part of optical gel, and it's not a problem. If we look here at this next slide, we can see that it survives freezing, it survives heat all the way up to 158 degrees Fahrenheit. The one thing you have to be careful is the adhesives may actually melt, like the white lightning is only really suitable up to about 100 degrees, and if you're getting in really super hot areas, you might have some problems with the adhesive melting, but the product itself is not going to be a problem. It's designed to survive all weather situations. Here's an example of a job that in the year we released this product and came out with it in 2016, you know, this question was yet to be determined. So before Pest World 2019, we went back to many different sites that were part of the first year of installs, and we see the picture below 2019. It was as clean and, you know, bird free as the day that we installed the product. So this stuff does last a long time. It's very, very effective long-term solution. As far as the labor, it's mostly cleanup. You know, gluing the dish down is fairly easy. It's mostly cleanup. You have the cost of material and then access equipment. Sometimes a ladder is going to take a lot longer to get up and down. You want to use a lift, a scissors lift, or an articulating boom lift. Those are your cost factors. Let's talk about estimating a project now. Now that you know how to install everything, you understand the biology, Let's talk about a project example. The first thing what we want to do is determine all the pressure areas. Sometimes there's high pressure, that's the main source of the problem, but there is medium pressure surrounding it that has to be treated, and we can measure and calculate based on those pressures. You want to always factor in extra. Don't have just enough discs to do the job, and the reason why is just having a little bit of extra beyond what's needed gives you the ability to offer additional monthly service, and the customer is very open to this idea. This was one of the surprises in year 2 and 3 of the product, is that people love the idea of having additional monthly maintenance to come back and make sure not just that the solution is working, but where the birds have relocated to can be treated as well to further solve the problem in the way the customer wants. So here we see the medium pressure that was above the internal nesting of this structure. We can space the disc out a little bit further. This customer did not want any birds on this surface anymore. So we had to cover the whole surface with 10-inch. Underneath where the bird was nesting, we used 6-inch center to center after we remove the nest. And here's the cost. This project took 3 hours. There was $784 in material. This included 168 discs, but only 150 were used to solve the problem. So there were 18 extra discs. And that first install was sold for $2,327. They also offered $95 for the next 6 months to deal with any movement of the birds that came from this nesting cavity. And after only 2 months, the birds were gone. This total sale, just under $3,000, was very profitable. But most importantly, the customer found great value, was very happy with the way that this turned out for them. So there's an example of pricing. Here's another example of pricing. You see in the corner above is where the birds were nesting, in the corners of this steel I-beam structure that was above an eating area at a high school in Arizona. The rest of the ledge needed to be covered with 10-inch spacing. So once we know those factors that were causing the problem, we can go in and do the estimating based on the number of discs. So there were 12 corners. Each corner needed 12 discs. So there was 144 discs. Then the rest of the 200 feet of rows, 2 rows at 10 inches, that's 480 more discs. So that was 624 discs minimum needed to do the job. So they ordered 700 discs. That material cost was roughly $2,500. That included cleanup materials, dissolve it, and everything. And they sold the job for $8,500. Not only was the install very profitable, but they were on retainer for several months afterwards and able to charge $150. And that was to use up these remaining 70 so discs that were part of the original cost, to just cover areas where the birds had moved to, wherever they were placing their feet. So that's 2 examples of how to price the job. Sometimes we can do really big jobs with this project, with this type of product, okay? Here is a netting project that was at a cost of roughly $100,000 to net this giant overhead structure. The customer just didn't have that much in the budget. So what was done was optical gel was used first to test a couple of areas. Using the starter kits, they went in and treated one of the bars to show that no more droppings would be falling from that area. And after about 30 days, the customer saw the results and went ahead and pulled the trigger and did this whole job. One of the nice things about large projects like this is that you can work in smaller phases. It doesn't always have to be done like in one weekend. Sometimes we do a section. Sometimes we even do that section and charge for just a section at a time to help with the cost. Much less expensive than some of the bigger netting projects. And again, the test area is the key to selling things like that. But remember, we don't just propose optical gel on something like this. We still will propose stealth net and other traditional methods, and then generally the lowest cost option will be optical gel, and the customer will gravitate towards that based on the cost. Here are many examples of where to use the product. Again, we don't always just use the product by itself. Sometimes, as we saw on the sign, we use mesh with it. Here's window sills, chimneys, along with plastic sheeting where the birds were kept out of that chimney that was no longer in use, parapet ledges, tube structures like this overhead, steel beams that we just saw in the school, roll-up doors also on the inside. We saw an open door earlier. On the inside where the birds go is a great place for the product. If you use it in areas like skylights where the product itself is visible, you want to make sure you use nice straight lines so that the product blends in better. Channel lettering is a really great opportunity for this. Bird spikes on signage is just really not the best solution, and many marketing people within big brand companies don't want to see spike. They'll use either shock track or optical gel for signage like this. Here's an example of using the product specifically for gulls. Gulls in their nesting area, once the nests were vacated, this product worked very well. Now the strategy to use the bricks that we see in this picture are all part of overall strategy that we've developed. And this strategy is kept in these diagrams that are bird specific that we have to offer on our website. Under Optical Gel on our website for installers, we have these diagrams like we see for woodpeckers, mud swallows, gulls. These help tremendously if you have a bird specific problem and you want to solve it. So go to our website and download these diagrams that will be very helpful. HVAC units you can use this product on, but keep in mind we generally exclude the bottoms using mesh or netting underneath, but the tops can be covered with the product to keep birds off the top areas. Billboards, bridges. Now we get up to areas like bridges or difficult to access areas. Whether it needs it or not, we recommend you do the 6-inch spacing. You don't want to have any failures and have to rent another 90-foot extended boom lift and shut down a bridge. There's a lot of cost involved in that. Make sure you use proper spacing on hard to get to areas like that, or up high railing areas like we see here. There are so many uses, and again, just wherever the birds place their feet is the key to using the product. Even sometimes when there are slanted surfaces that the disc can be visible from, it still looks a lot better than having these birds and all the droppings. As a matter of fact, use the droppings as your guide. Here we see the before picture above. Basically tells the story where the birds are most interested. They want to get up high. They want to have this vantage point. So we just put the disc wherever they are. Here we see a rooftop where the birds droppings were wherever we see these discs. There's a big area in the middle that's not covered because the birds did not show they really needed or wanted that area. And that works just fine when we follow the droppings. Sometimes we have to think outside the box, and we're trying to always innovate here and think of everything possible, but occasionally somebody will bring us a problem like this where the birds were nesting on a bunch of wires that were not able to be treated in any way. So the middle small picture, if you look closely, that's PVC mesh, and we've zip tied the disc to that mesh, and then we take that whole structure and just zip tie that to the area where the wires were, and the birds are solved. In the early days, we see mistakes like this. They were quite common. We see a sign and the customer says, hey, this doesn't work. Well, they didn't follow any of the instructions, okay? If we look at the list here, these letters were large. And what happens, the bird returned immediately, and they were moving and covering the disc. Well, all the problems are listed. They ignored the install plan. They did not pre-treat. They installed the disc right on top of droppings, and not only that, they didn't even bother to use glue, and then they called this a failure. Well, the good thing that came out of this was the starter kit that we showed you earlier in the video. This particular failure allowed us to understand what the customer needs were, and therefore for all the installers out there, that starter kit is self-contained and has everything in it. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready to release a whole new line that includes even the contractor box with everything included, much more thorough, easy to use system with all kinds of tools that are part of it. And so stay tuned for more on products that we innovate with. Here's one last successful example of a job where this project was actually used in PMP magazine as one of the earlier jobs that was a success story. You see on the left, this was an overhead area of a toy store, and birds were all over this area nesting. They cleaned it very thoroughly. Since this area wasn't visual, you couldn't really see it from below, the pattern didn't have to be perfect, but the product certainly did its job. That project, a few things that I want to point out for you to learn from. The client said they wanted all the birds gone, and they wanted no visual deterrence. So the installer called us. One of the things that we remind you, don't guarantee that you're going to get rid of all birds. What you're going to do is reduce resident bird activity. Optical Gel is great at reducing resident bird activity. And in this case, the birds vacated after the first week. Customer was thrilled, and the installer made very good money on his very first project with Optical Gel. The last thing we're going to show you is another great example of how the product could be used. This is the city of Manhattan Beach here in Southern California. They had a really bad problem with birds that were constantly roosting on the top of this structure at the end of the pier. So they said, we want to give this a try, but we'll only do this area where the birds are mostly staying. So they covered the top area, and after 12 months, sure enough, that area stayed clean. So they removed those discs, they cleaned the rest of the roof, they went back, and they wanted to do the whole install of the whole area. Myself and the president of our company, Cameron Riddell, went down there and used drones. We really documented this in a very good way so that everyone can understand and learn from it. You see the spacing, again, not nesting, right? They were not nesting on this roof, so we could afford to spread them out a little more. And it was important because there were a lot of discs used on this rooftop. You see the articulating boom lift allowed for access. And later that day, on my phone and along with a GoPro that Cameron had, we saw one of the best OG shuffle examples you'll ever see right here. 30 or 40 birds that just refused to ever land on this roof, and it's been clean ever since. These birds no longer use that, place stays clean. This is an example of how powerful the product is. This product has really innovated the bird control industry. We've covered everything that we can think of in terms of the product. Here again, you have the ability to get a hold of any of us, any of the reps here at Bird Barrier will be able to help you with the product and any solution. Although I'm the technical director of the product, my name is Michael Gallion. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll be glad to help you to use this product and make sure that you're off to the races. This is a product that can be used to really kickstart your bird control program. If you're in the world of pest control, this is the product to use. Optical Gel here in the United States, the rest of the world except for Canada, where we use Optica. That's it for now. Hopefully this helps you with all of your bird control in the future, and we will see you at the next module.